Hello, everybody. Welcome to the MVA Medtech Network webinar. We're really happy to have you online and to have our speakers online with us. But before starting, I would like to just go through a few of our household rules. As you've probably noticed, you are automatically muted. If you have any questions, for example, technical questions, then you can use the chat function. However, for the Q&A sessions to our speakers after each talk, please use the Q&A function. You can find both of them when you go over your screen and get the menu bar in your screen and choose either chat for technical questions or Q&A for questions to our speakers. In the Q&A, you can comment questions from other participants. You can also like them or upgrade them or add anything if you have some additional questions. And then in the end, we will do a short poll. It will just pop up on your screen. It's a few very short questions, almost yes, no answers, so it shouldn't take any time. And we'll be very happy if you could help us answer those. Also, please note that this event will be recorded and we will make the recording available on the MVA YouTube channel after the event. So now we can really start, and I would like to welcome Petter, our CEO, for a few words of welcome. Petter, please come on.
Thank you so much. I will see if I can start sharing my screen here. Just a second. Now I hope it's working.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and welcome everyone to MVA's Medtech Network, facilitated by us at Medicon Valley Alliance in collaboration with our members, Saxocon, Ideon Science Park, and Sensagen. The Medtech Network were launched in 2007, and we normally arrange 2 meetings on a yearly basis, and normally I can say that the meetings also takes place physically in either Lund or Copenhagen with good networking opportunities, but due to the COVID situation, of course, we have decided to turn these meetings into a webinar format. But I'm really satisfied to see that the high participation rate seems to continue. We have some more than 100 signups, if I understood it right today, which is really nice and rewarding. I can say that the Medtech Network is one out of, in total, 5 networks that we run at MVA. You can see them on my screen here. We have, besides the Medtech Network, also an oncology network, an R&D network, a microbiome network, and an executive club network. And these networks are all available, and you can partake free of charge, of course, if you're a member of Medicon Valley Alliance. And if you would like to be a member or like to know more about what it's like to be a member of Medicon Valley Alliance, we are, of course, more than happy to answer any questions. And you're welcome to reach out to us after this meeting. Over to today's meeting, I think I will say that this meeting will focus on, as you have seen in the invitation, on how to cope with the corona crisis. And besides being a major health crisis, it's also a situation where our innovation capacity is really put into test. So to give you some inspiration, we have invited 3 distinguished speakers today that will give us some inspiration, as I said, and we will have the opportunity to listen to some case stories on how to find an opportunity in a time of crisis. And first, we will listen to Farzad Saber from Automatic, followed by Dan Pitulia from Coala Life, and last but not least, Mikkel Wagner from Ambu. Thank you so much, the 3 of you, for being with us today. And without further ado, I would like to say that it's time to start, and over to you, Farzad. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Peter. Let me see if I can make the video work and change to my screen. Please let me know when you can see the screen.
Perfect. It's all there.
It's all there. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Farzad, and as Peter mentioned, I talked to him this morning. It's a little bit difficult to sit and talk for 10 or 15 minutes to a screen since I can't see you. So looking forward to getting some questions afterward. My background, I am from DTU, Master in Engineering, and when I'm going through my presentation, you can see that I've been working with medical devices, but my background is mostly from engineering part. So, and I've been working for many years, both as a manager and as a consultant. And our history actually starts for about 10 years ago, when I was working as a consultant at the Villa Hospital. And, you know, at that time, we were working with the IT, and I always been working with IT. And that time, I just was wondering why they had so many devices, just standalone devices, and nurses were just running around and muting devices. In some cases, the devices were just alarming, and they said, it's okay, we know it's fine. And I just, you know, the technology was quite mature in that time to automating some of those processes. So I talked to the CIO of the hospital. I just said, well, it's strange. I mean, we have systems, we have the possibility for using robotic technology, but there are so many manual processes at the hospitals. And he said, well, yeah, that's a good idea. And just say, let's have a workshop. Let's talk about how we can do it more automatically, talking about the technology, about our opportunities. And those who were interested, they could participate in that workshop. And he sent an invitation to a number of nurses and physicians, and just said that if anybody's interested, we can have a workshop about technology, what's possible, and what can we do, some examples of different technologies. And about 10 nurses and physicians participated in that meeting, and voluntary. I mean, there was no specific agenda for the meeting, just brainstorming. And all of a sudden, it seems that when we start talking about technologies, a lot of new ideas came up. Why are we doing it manually? Can we change it, or can it be done? You know, wow. And all of a sudden, we had 3 or 4 really, really good ideas that makes me wondering why nobody has done it before. So since we were talking, it's just let's go back to see if those ideas, when we can see the products and we can find the technologies. And we started looking at the internet and trying to do our first market research, and saw that nobody was selling those products. And since we were just doing it on a hobby basis, just, you know, having meeting in closed groups and discussing the opportunities. And that was the idea of automatic started. And one of those group was regarding automatic oxygen therapy. And we're just wondering, it seems quite easy. We can have, you know, monitor the patients. And if, you know, the saturation falls, we decrease oxygen. It seems quite simple. And as engineering background, it can take more than a couple of months, and we have a product. So we started working on the first prototypes, and you could see that it works. I mean, actually, quite well. And still, there weren't any other products like that at the market at that time. So we started talking to some investors and asking, are you willing to, you know, invest in the idea? And the answer we got was that, well, have you wondered why nobody else has done it before? Yeah, we know that it's a good idea to manage the oxygen, but you can only use it for the COPD patients. Just for your information, in that time, it was actually quite normal to say that if everybody knows that if you don't get oxygen, it's bad, you die. But, you know, the practice is that, well, we give them too much oxygen. And why are we going to, purchase a product that probably cost, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 euro at that time, and it just makes sure you get the right amount of oxygen. We just give them too much. It's okay. And so the investors said nobody's going to buy those devices because COPD, yeah, they are oxygen sensitive. We cannot give them too much oxygen, but it's a small group. We are not going to invest in that product. So we tried a couple of times and get rejected. In 2013, Region Wholesale Capital in Denmark said, okay, let's try to see if it works. So we made actually a prototype, tested on some simulators, and showed actually quite a good results. But it still was quite difficult to get funding. And I remember at that time, we asked Højteknologifonden in Denmark. We sent an application and then sent it to a professor. I think he was over 70 years old, and he just wrote back. His verdict was, I have looked at the title and automatic oxygen therapy. We are never going to treat patients with machines. And I'm not going to read the rest of the application. So that was the response at that time, that we are not going to use robotic devices in treating patients. So in 2016, we just have tried everything. Nobody was interested in investing in our idea, said that it's too narrow and you're just going to use it for some COPD patients. But the Innovation Fund said, well, we believe in you, and they gave us about 1 million euro. Let's see if you can develop a medical device and CE-mark the device. So we started in 2017, we established the company, Automatic. In 2018, we published our first study regarding safety. I come back to it. And in February 2019, we CE-marked our product. And at that time, Linde was interested in our product. They contacted us, and we actually started, moving in 7, 8 countries very fast. And in February 2020, we were the winner of the Danish government's Innovation Award. And at that time, coronavirus was coming. It was actually quite new. So we contacted some hospitals and asking, we have this device that can be used for COPD patients. We have bad lungs. And we could imagine it also could be useful for COVID patients. And we were rejected by all the hospitals and said, we are ready, we have enough beds, and everything's under control. And we are using the equipment that we know, and we are not going to change, if something happens. We have trained our personnel, and everybody's ready to use the equipment they know. So there's no room for start experimenting with new devices. So in the March, when COVID also came to Denmark, and the number of patients started to increase, and there was no room at those special departments to start treating patients at the rest of the hospitals, and also at the pulmonary departments and lung departments. And those departments, they were using our device for COPD patients. So they connected our device and start treating them with the Automatic. And they could see that it was helping. They didn't need to monitor patients as many times they do when do it manually. The oxygen therapy, I come back to it. And patients were actually quite stable. So they were getting the oxygen they needed, and the nurses didn't need to visit the patient so many times. And it went very, very quickly. Then all the hospitals in Copenhagen started to purchasing and implementing our device, and just moving to the rest of the Denmark and to other countries. And that's why, the idea starting with the COPD, start moving to be used at COVID. And I come back to it later too. So let's look at what it is we are doing with our device. Many of you probably have seen a flow meter. That's a traditional way of treating patients. And what happens, they get a fixed flow, and nurses come. It's actually quite normal when you have a patient like COPD, like COVID patients, that nurses have to visit the patient something between 30 to 60 times per day. And they measure the saturation in the blood, and they adjust the oxygen manually, and just come back again later and do the same. So patients get this fixed amount of oxygen but the saturation in the blood can change. It's called SpO2. So it means that your flow will be changing and the saturation will be changing too. And for those of you who are not been working with oxygen, it was actually quite new for me when I started working with oxygen, is that the oxygen is actually one of the most dangerous medicines, because everybody knows that if you don't get oxygen, it's a question of minutes before you die if you have bad lungs. And but the idea of too much oxygen is dangerous is actually quite new. I come back to it too later. So what we do with our device is, instead of having a fixed amount of oxygen, we have a target for saturation. So we say that the nurses and the physician can choose a range for the SpO2 and a range for oxygen flow. And our device automatically tries to adjust the oxygen so saturation is so stable as possible. So it's a huge change. Instead of giving a fixed amount of oxygen, we are focusing on having a more stable saturation. And our device is just adjusting the oxygen. This is some data from a patient. You can see how it works. In this case, you can see the flows that the physician has chosen, that which saturation the patient should have, and how much oxygen the patient can get. In this case, it's between 0 and 6 liters per minute. And it can be higher, and it can be from 2 to 15 liters. So it's something that normally is defined by the medical staff. And even though when we are looking at the data for 20 hours, below you can see the oxygen flow, that the device is changing the oxygen, and the SpO2 can see the range for the saturation, how much it changes. So even though we are monitoring the patient every second and we act on the changes in the saturation, you see we do 1,000 times, adjusting the oxygen. And even a nurse is standing to the patient and monitoring the patient all the time. You cannot do so much adjustments. So if you just visit the patient twice an hour or 3 times an hour, you rapidly can have a situation that patient get either too much or too little oxygen in that period of time. And even we are monitoring the patient every second. You can see we can just make sure that the patients are in the right range in about 90% of the time. And probably some of you will ask, how come you're not at 100%? So if you have that question, just write it to me. I answer it later. It's actually quite a good question. So that's how it works actually, our device. And this is our clinical study I mentioned before. As you can see, it was a crossover study. So we were talking about the same patients, starting the day either by getting automatic treatment and changing to manual, and vice versa. So in that case, having the patient in the right target, when we do it automatically, in about 85% of the time, patients are in target. When we do it manually, the red area, it means that the patients are in target in less than 50% of the time. And in about 20%, patient can have a saturation under 85% when they get manually treated. It means that they have very, very low oxygen level in their body. It's actually quite dangerous. And similar results have been confirmed in some other studies in other countries too. So when it's done by nurses and doctors, even they are doing their best and they have the time, they cannot give patients the right amount of oxygen in more than 50% of the time. And that's why robotic devices are best. And the whole idea for us when we started focusing on COPD patients, because COPD patients, they cannot get too much oxygen. And but other patients in that time, it was quite normal to say, well, let's give them too much oxygen. It's okay. When the COVID-19 started, WHO had some guidelines how to treat COVID patients. So based on those guidelines regarding what the saturation should be and what the flow should be, those information can be part of our device. We have some templates, some profiles where we define how a specific kind of sickness should be treated. And there are some more guidelines here. So March, we defined the new profiles and called them for COVID low flow, COVID high flow, and or all profiles, COPD patients, based on the guidelines from the WHO, that the patient, when we are talking about COVID low flow, should have a saturation between 92 and 96 and oxygen flow between 0 and 8 liter. And it means that hospitals could just get the patients and connect the patients to our device and just choosing profile. And our device will just start treating them. So they just need to look at them a couple of times a day instead of doing it 40, 50 times per day. And at that time, as we know, they have to change PPEs, moving from one patient to another patient. And if you do it, let's say even 40, 50 times per day, it just, it requires a lot of time, just, monitoring patients, moving from one room to another room, from one patient to another patient. So they could spend the time on patients instead of just moving around, adjusting oxygen.
Farzad, it's also soon time for some questions.
Yeah, I think I jumped to this one and I can have the questions. And what they also showed that in 2018, we got the first bigger analyzed article in Lancet showing that too much oxygen is actually too dangerous. When we started up, everybody said we are going to give patients too much oxygen. But it shows now that by giving too much oxygen, you increase the risk for mortality by about 20%. And there are a couple of different articles I have in my presentation. You can get it afterward. And also when we start talking about COVID patients in Denmark, saying stop giving patients too much oxygen. So when we started our journey in 2010, everybody said it's okay, we just give them too much oxygen, it's not so dangerous. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it's just showing too much oxygen is actually very, very dangerous. And that's what, the idea about oxygen automatic, now it's, many hospitals are starting implementing our device. So it's time for some questions.
That's great. Thank you, Farzad. That was super interesting. So anybody who has questions, you can just type them in the Q&A function. And Farzad, as far as I understand, your product has actually really gained from the attention that COVID put on oxygen treatments. And do you think this will have a longer duration effect on your business, or will it just get back to where it was before?
Very good question. I mean, you never know what's going to happen after COVID, but I think, the COVID has shown that, underlines the importance of not giving too much oxygen to the patients, because even in last year, we talked to many physicians, they said, we are still giving liberal oxygen, too much oxygen is okay. So it's just confirming that too much oxygen is dangerous too. And also, hospitals getting used to using robotic devices, because everybody's talking about we need nurses, we need doctors, and we need to have to do something to do it process automatically. And I think automatic is one of those devices that can help the hospitals instead of having a lot of manual processes that can be done by devices.
Yeah. There's also a few questions in the chat here, or in the Q&A. One question asks, what is your biggest skill problem at the moment? And that is Nikolai Enevoldsen who asks you that, in case you know him.
Yeah. Well, during the COVID, one of our biggest challenge was, to find the components for our device, because the same components have been used in different respiratory devices. So it has been a huge problem to produce the number of units we needed. I think we are getting it under control. So it's getting better now, but the components and deliveries from China and the United States have been some of major challenges.
And then another question is about your competitors. Do you have competition from the major medtech companies, or are you rather alone on this segment of the market?
Yeah, good question too. Because when we were trying to find the funding for our project, try to contact some of major companies, talking to them. and they just said that many of them are producing monitoring devices, and they said there is a line. When we are going to treat the patients, something else, and it wasn't part of their strategy. So we were rejected by many companies saying that it's not part of their business. But we can see that new companies are coming into the market with automatic oxygen therapy. So right now we're just one or two companies, but I could imagine in a couple of years there will be more companies, delivering automatic oxygen therapy devices.
And then the last question from Ingela Hallberg. The COVID-19 patients treated with your device, will they be registered in any way for follow-up, like in a real-life registry?
I know that Region Hovedstaden they are going to running a post-marketing study, but I am not sure how they're registered in their systems. But I think they're going to look at 100 patients to see the effects by treating them automatically by automatic. What are the consequences? But some things will come out of it. I mean, some articles.
That's great. Thank you, Farzad.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for your talk. Thanks for the questions from the audience. We'll shift to next speaker, and that will be Dan Pitulia from Coala Life. Dan, can you turn on your camera? Yes, and share your screen.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. So are you seeing my screen as well?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, just hold a second. There you go.
Yes, and then just in presentation mode. Perfect. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Pitulia. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the medtech industry for about 20 years. Hearing implants, pharmacy style type products, healthcare services like refractive surgery, drug-eluting bone cement, to mention a few things that I've been dealing in the last 20 years. Built and sold 4 companies in the space of the last 20 years. And before that, I was in fast-moving consumer goods, and I was, during my whole career, worked on a global scale. So I'm going to talk about Coala, which is spelled with a C and not a K. I cannot see myself, so I hope you guys can see what I'm showing you. This is the product. It's a very small little device. It's patient-centered, so it's not. It's operated by the patient themselves, and it's connected to this little app, as you see on the screen there. Okay, and it's about the same size as an AirPod case. So very user-friendly, very easy to use, and you can basically onboard anybody remotely. And this device, which is an important piece of information, was originally designed as a stethoscope. So if you turn the device around, you will see the back, and there's a membrane here, and that membrane picks up both heart sounds and lung sounds, which today is, of course, a little bit more important than it was a while ago. And when COVID-19 started to emerge, we realized that our product, which is patient-centered and designed for remote monitoring, patients are not allowed to go to the doctors don't want to see the patients, everybody's staying at home. We pretty early realized that this is going to be a global crisis, because these people will not be treated the way they should, and maybe there's a risk that more people will perish because of COVID-19 than of COVID-19. So we rapidly engaged in designing a, let's call it a remote monitoring program, which is truly virtual, okay? So, and we took a decision to accelerate and not to break. We were told that we cannot talk to our customers But of course we can, because we can talk to them in the virtual world, as we are doing right now. And this goes for sales, because we can talk to them, virtually. We can do onboarding virtually, and we can create partnerships also virtually. This might sound like, this is not possible in this day and age, but this is just what is possible in this day and age. So we engaged in something and created something called Coala Connect. And most of you are in the medical device industry, so you know that going from being a R&D company to a marketing company to a sales company, and then on top of it becoming a production company with ISO 13485 is a bit of an uphill battle from an administrative and regulatory point of view. But we managed to do that fairly quickly. So we are now going live as we speak in Sweden, in the Netherlands, and in Germany, and of course in the US with what we call Coala Connect. And Coala Connect basically means that the doctor and the patient are connecting through whatever form and fashion they deem relevant. It could be Teams, could be Skype, could be FaceTime, could be WhatsApp, whatever works in that respective country, or it could be a platform like in Sweden with Doctrine or something like that. And if the doctor decides that the patient would benefit from an investigation and a check on their heart, they would prescribe the Coala in the care portal that we provide the doctor with. And we will then automatically send the Coala to the patient's home. They will perform they will do the onboarding online with the app because it's quite simple. They will do the measurements for about 2 weeks, which seems to be where it's all coming down to. The doctor will get the data in real time, and they will probably look at it twice a day. And the patient will also get the data in real time. The data is uploaded into the Azure Microsoft Cloud. There's an algorithm that computes the heart data, compares it with a big data bank with millions and millions of measurements, and then we decide, is this an okay ECG or is it not an okay ECG? And we will then inform both the patient and the caregiver. And then they take it from there. And normally, this is intermittent, so the patient will measure twice a day or whenever they have an episode like palpitations or slight pressure on the chest or something like that. The patient will then return the Coala device to us. We will then quarantine right now, but quarantine, clean, reset, and repeat. The doctor will not meet the patients in real life unless there's an absolute requirement. They will not even see the device in real life because they don't have to. The only thing that interests the caregiver is, of course, the data. And then they will take it from there. We're now starting a fairly large trial in south of Sweden. We have tried this in a couple of places in central Sweden with good results. So we're starting to offer it to our customers. We already have some 20 customers in the US because the Americans are always a bit faster, one would have to admit. I will go to, the things that enables us to do this is that we decided that we're probably a little bit too small to do everything ourselves. So we have partnered up either with hospital systems, with other big players in this field to get more notoriety, because we're a small company. We're 20 employees in total. We've been around for 4 years, out of which half of it was spent developing the product. So we have a partnership with Bayer and Microsoft, of course, because they host our cloud solution. But Bayer is involved in the whole. They support the whole Coala Connect, both to caregivers, but also if a private citizen decides that I want to buy my Coala and I want to do a check on my heart and have it investigated by the cardiologist remotely, they will support the actual logistics of that whole thing. And I don't believe that they sell any more drugs in the near term, but they want to support the digitalization and the enabling of cardiac monitoring. Another interesting thing is something that we just launched last week, which is called Perry Virtual, and Perry is a hospital system in southern Tennessee, in Linden, Tennessee, and they are going to cardiovascular CVD, cardiovascular diseases remotely in a rural population. They are, of course, as you know, the southern part of the US has been fairly heavily hit by COVID-19. And this enables them to remotely monitor these patients. They will only bring them in when they absolutely have to, but they can still, check them in their safety of their home. And so what we did with COVID-19, we actually used the emergency ruling issued by the FDA and added, so the original stethoscope function now can be used for lung auscultation as well. As you know, so we're not just doing ECGs anymore, we're also checking the lungs. And so we redeveloped or renewed our app, so it now has two features. You can either do only ECG, or you can do only lungs, or you can do both. And that we were already working on the project, but we of course accelerated the project when this happened. So we're launching the app is actually going live this coming Monday in the US, and we have a host of operators and caregivers, plus a couple of actual virtual hospitals that will now start to use this on their chronic patients that are treated at home. So the virtual hospital, of course, fits a virtual product. So I think, what used to take 3 years now take 3 months or maybe even 3 weeks. Digitalization will go really, really fast now. And it seems that a lot of the hurdles that we were facing just melted away. Everybody's now prepared to listen to us, a little bit like, oxygenation, that all of a sudden technology is not such a bad thing. And I would say that it's maybe a bit sad that we have to end up in a crisis for people to embrace change. But maybe that's what history tells us, that crisis drives change. It's real-time monitoring, it is remote, it's digital, it's patient-enabled, it's on your phone, and it's cloud-based, very simple to use. And I guess that's it. We are making this into an opportunity rather than a crisis. Some of our competitors have furloughed their employees or part of their employees because they cannot talk to their customers. And we decided we just need to find a new way to talk to our customers. And I think that sums it up.
That's great, Dan. Thank you very much for this. Well, it's mostly a summary because it's very short, of course. But if there are any questions from the audience, you can start typing in the Q&A. And in the meantime, I was wondering, actually, did you have to recruit also extra people, and how does that go in these virtual times for a startup like you?
Yeah, so we have recruited people in Sweden, and in Sweden, of course, it's not so virtual, as you know, because they kept the country open pretty much. So here we can meet people IRL. In the US, we have hired people remotely and digitally. So we do Teams and we do FaceTime. We also do we have onboarded customers remotely as well. So we don't send anybody out to the caregivers anymore. But we hired people, and it works reasonably well.
And then you were also talking about that in the end, what has accelerated your development is not only COVID, but also the fact that regulation is permitting you to go a bit quicker.
Yes, no, of course. I think the Americans were probably a bit more. They were late in the start, but once they got started, they really, accelerated all the aspects of trying to deal with the crisis. And one was, of course, that FDA, first they actually allowed digital patient meetings, which were not allowed. You had to have a physical meeting to clock the patient visit in the US. And in the US, it's all about clocking the patient visit. But they allowed to do that on Skype or FaceTime or whatever. So overnight, that was now permitted. And then the FDA issued this emergency ruling, which of course allowed you, provided that you could meet certain criteria, allowed you to expand your labeling, which we have done. So we have added the lung function, we have opened up the number of categories of atrial fibrillation, the different variants of it. We are going to launch more expansions on the labeling. But we also have the plan that we're not doing this temporarily. We're doing this with a view to make it permanent. So we're looking at the short term to get it out there, but also to make sure that it stays. So we're seeing this as an opportunity to accelerate our regulatory approval process.
There is also a question in the Q&A asking if clinical trials are costly for this type of equipment.
Not so much. No, I wouldn't say that. Because it doesn't involve any, there's no surgery, there's not a lot of intervention involved. So you can fairly easily do trials, and the only thing you need is somebody who is interested in doing something and the devices, and then somebody to run the trial, an administrator. It's not that complicated. So most of the initiatives that we're launching right now are also seeking out IRB approval or ethical committee approval at the same time as we're launching trials, more user trials, or we're trying to investigate something and see how will it work in real life. But we also make it into collecting data and presenting that data at some stage.
That sounds good. I can't see any more. Last question. Is it possible for patients to use this to monitor their lung function ahead of seeking healthcare?
Well, yes, they could, but there has to be two of them, because of the lung function, you need somebody else that helps you auscultate on your back, because it's a bit difficult on your chest. But yes, you can.
Yeah, so they can privately. You can privately order it. Yeah, you don't have to have a doctor.
In Europe, it's OTC approved. In the US, it's not yet OTC approved, but we have applied for it.
All right. Great. Thank you very much, Dan. That was a lovely talk, and thanks for the answers to the questions. Let's go to our next speaker. That will be Mikkel Wagner from Ambu. And Mikkel, you can turn on your... Fantastic, we can see your presentation.
Perfect, and maybe you can also hear me?
Yes, and see you. Thank you.
Perfect, great. Well, first of all, thank you to the Medicon Valley Alliance for the invitation. My name is Mikkel. I've been with Ambu for 13 years. I work in communication. I'm the head of communication at Ambu. And I will start by giving a sort of a short overview of Ambu as a company. If I can get my slides to change, that is. I brought actually a lot of slides, so I hope, there we go. All right, Ambu, we supply devices, single-use medical devices for hospitals and ambulance services and clinics. We were founded in 1937, so we're not quite a startup, but I actually believe that we have some of the characteristics of a startup. We are quite agile. We are able to move fast for a company that's sort of, I would probably say mid-size. We are 3,500 employees worldwide, and we have innovation centers, primary innovation center in Denmark, also innovation in Germany, China, Malaysia, and the US. And then we have our production in China, Malaysia, and also the US. And I will get back to that, because that's quite important for this story about life during Corona times. We are very much focused on single-use devices to improve workflow for healthcare professionals and to improve patient care. And that goes for simple, relatively simple devices like masks, anesthesia masks, but also in the past 10 years, we've done a lot of innovation within single-use endoscopes. First, bronchoscopes for treating of lung procedures, but now we're moving into a lot of other areas: ear, nose, throat, urology, and also GI. And that's an important point, because single use has advantages, and the main advantage that we see in COVID times is that it eliminates the risk of infection between patients. Here's a short view of the world as seen from Ambu. And I've included this slide also because the way that COVID-19 hit us, and that's not just us, but the whole world, started in Asia, and that's where we have our production. So we have a factory in China and a factory in Malaysia, and then of course it moved to the West. So I will give you a brief overview of the coronavirus as seen from the Ambu business, and I will do that through 3 points. The first one is that the virus has changed the demand patterns, which products are needed and which products are in high demand. And then of course it's also changed the way we work, so I will give some examples of that. And finally, the virus has put a spotlight on the advantages of single use. But let's move into the first point about the demand patterns. What we saw when the healthcare world started to react to the coronavirus was that our products were sort of split in 2 sections. Some of our products were suddenly very much in demand. For instance, our single-use bronchoscopes and our ventilation bags, Ambu bags. And these products are used in the treatment of COVID-19 patients. And then other products were less in demand because they were used, for instance, for some of these procedures that are put on hold or postponed while corona patients are on top of the list at hospitals. So suddenly we had this. I mean, our basic goal is, of course, to get the devices that are needed into the hands that need them, and we have a supply chain that's quite good, and I'm not just bragging here. We've been awarded for our supply chain, and as anyone who works in supply chain knows, it's an art of balancing forecasts and warehousing and deliveries and actual orders, and suddenly that became a whole new discipline with added complexity. I will add here, just in case anyone wonders about prices. We didn't increase prices on any of our products during COVID-19, just so that you know. But changes in demand patterns, that puts a lot of pressure on manufacturing, and we needed to switch our priorities. We needed to create more production lines for the bronchoscopes and for the resuscitators, and then scale down production of those products that were not as badly needed. And that sounds easy, of course, but it actually requires a lot of changes at our manufacturing plants. Then, as I mentioned, new demand patterns also puts pressure on supply chain. How do you manage warehousing and stock and get it to where the products are really needed? And usually we will ship products from Asia to Europe and the US, which takes 6 to 8 weeks on a ship. Suddenly that kind of lead time was not an option, which means that we decided to air freight a lot of the products that were really needed to be able to deliver to hospitals as soon as possible. This is, of course, an extra expense, but the whole point of delivering medical devices is to get it into the hands of the healthcare professionals. So of course this was something we needed to do. During all this, there's been a lot of communication going on internally at Ambu, of course, but also with customers on what are we doing. In the beginning, it was a lot about, for instance, our manufacturing plant in China. We got questions about safety. Is it possible to get infected with COVID-19 by opening a box of products that have been produced in China? All these sort of very practical questions, but important questions. And it's not possible if you wonder about that. Let's go to point number 2 about working under new conditions. And I'll start in the manufacturing plants. At the manufacturing plant in China, we were ordered to keep closed for an additional week, as every other business in China after the Chinese New Year. So the first week of February we were closed, and then when we needed to start up again, we had to supply protective face masks for all our employees, which was quite difficult. Actually, in all of China, we couldn't find any supplier of protective face masks. So we had to use our resources and network, and we actually ended up finding a supplier in Indonesia, and we were able to get 200,000 protective face masks for our production site in China, which were, and this is a photo of when they arrived, and it was a big team effort of actually supplying this to keep our employees safe and to keep production running. Then as the pandemic moved, or it became a pandemic, Malaysia was taking measures. So the Malaysian government in mid-March, they ordered a 2-week movement control, which meant that every business needed to close. We, in dialogue with the authorities, we were able to stay open to keep the production running, because we supply medical devices. So there was an effort to dialogue with authorities in order to make this happen. And as you can see here, there was also a question of very low low-key practical dialogue with officials, in this case a police officer, on being able to stay open. And then, of course, to be able to work in a safe manner, we've implemented all sorts of safety measures. Here's a photo from some of our colleagues in the US at our plant there, with face masks and keeping a distance. And the other photo to the right is from the cafeteria in our Malaysian plant. Different ways of making sure that it's safe for people to come to work. And of course, we've also highlighted these hygiene measures that I'm sure all of you know about. And then working under new conditions, working from home, we banned traveling in the Ambu business. This is a photo of the communication team. Because of GDPR, I didn't have permission from all my other colleagues to post photos of other colleagues working from home, but my own team has kindly agreed. But of course, as many of you probably know, this was also a very new situation. How do you work from home? How do you keep up efficiency? And I think that if anyone had a doubt that it was possible to be productive from home, I think they're not in doubt anymore. And as Dan mentioned about recruitment, we have kept our recruitment going. We recruit quite a lot of people at the moment. We changed a bit. First interviews were on Skype, and then if possible, we met face to face for the second interview. But in that sense, Corona hasn't slowed us down in that sense.
Mikkel, it's also soon for time for some questions.
Yes, so I will go really fast through the last slides here. Of course, we didn't have actual access to hospitals, so our salespeople couldn't go into hospitals. Our R&D people couldn't meet with doctors in physically, but that means that we have found other ways of communicating, and we have used digital communication a lot. We have actually engaged with some of our customers to help them produce videos where they filmed themselves, and we've edited, and they have been able to share good practice with their fellow colleagues. So, and on a happy note, we have not had to lay off employees or send employees home or ask people to take a pay cut. So that's of course a big luxury of being in this situation and not working in other businesses like travel or tourism. So final point is the spotlight on advantages of single-use devices. With the virus, I think it's become very clear that the infection is something that is that needs to be taken seriously, and patient care will be the better for it. That was my really fast wrap up, Sophie. So feel
Thanks.
free to.
Yes, I have already a few questions here. There is a question about the air freight. Is there still any capacity there, or did you have any problems in the repurposing of the?
Did we have any problems of actually getting hold of a plane?
No, the freight capacity for transporting your products in the supplies rather, because you said you changed from shipping to airlines.
Exactly, because usually we will use shipping because it's more environmentally friendly, and it's also less expensive. But of course, it takes a lot more planning because you have 8 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks on the sea. So usually we will use air freight for emergencies if there has been some sort of setback in production and our stocks are low. But in this case, it was a question of getting the products from our factories to the hospitals
and the flights were still going. The airlines are still proposing those services.
Yes, I mean these are not commercial flights, so these are freight.
Great. And for out of curiosity, did you have any COVID cases between your employees?
I believe we've had a few, yes, but no serious ones. And of course, we've had these measures of if you feel ill, stay at home. If you've been to back when traveling was possible, if you've been to one of these countries and you get back, you need to be in isolation for 2 weeks in your home. So people would work from home, and we haven't had any cases that were worse than a normal flu, and that's of course very positive.
Yeah. Would you have any advice to other companies on anything you have experienced and where you think, oh, this is really something we need to share?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of different things. I think from my perspective, a communication perspective, I think that you need, in a case like this, you need to communicate a lot with your customers, with your collaborators, for instance, suppliers. But of course, that's too late. If you start doing that when the crisis hits, you need to have that relationship beforehand. And internal communication has been a huge topic because people need to know what can we do, what can't we do. People are smart and they will work within the frame, but you need to set up that frame and you need to signal what do we as a company, what do we stand for. We've followed the government guidelines from the start, but of course those guidelines, they come at odd hours and sometimes not as specific as you would want, but then you have to interpret that into your own situation and frame.
Right. Great. Thank you very much. Then today's session is coming to an end. And of course, I really would like to thank, first of all, our speakers, Farzad, Dan, and Mikkel. You have all done a really, really great job. Thank you so much for talking to us, even if you can see us or hear us close by. Thanks to the audience too for your questions and being so actively involved. We've learned a lot of things about finding opportunities in these difficult times, and also all the hard work and the adaptation skills that you have put into practice to actually get there where you are today. So before closing this poll, this session, I would like to just send a quick poll where you can give us a little bit of input on how this webinar was for you. It's very short. There is only 7 questions, and it's almost yes/no questions. That would be really, really great. And then, of course, the last thing is to say goodbye. Hopefully, we will see you again. Either in real life, that's what I hope most, of course, and otherwise online again for other webinars at Medicon Valley Alliance. Thank you very much to all of you. We'll keep this session a little bit open so that everybody gets a chance to answer the poll, but I'll close for today, and thank you very much. Goodbye.